Patrick essentially had to find that out when watching the show back. Am I surprised? No. Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I just woke up from a nap. I'm a little bit groggy, but these interviews came out, so I really want to talk about them. So I'm going to be talking about the Veal Files. This is from a guy named Nick Veal. Him and his wife have a podcast, and they were able to get interviews with Blake, Patrick, and Kacie. So that's what I'll be talking about today. I will also be talking about Anna. Anna, I don't think she's done a physical interview, but she did talk about like why she left the experiment in, I think a magazine or something, and just explain like from her point of view, what her thought process was and why she didn't kind of say bye to everyone. But we'll start with the Veal Files right now. So I'll just talk about the interview with Nick Veal. So the interview starts out with Blake, and, you know, basically Nick wants to know if Blake regrets, you know, not saying bye to Megan and any other connection he had in the pods before he just decided to leave. And, you know, Blake was very honest, and he said that at the time he had a lot going on in his mind. Emotionally, he was thinking about his dad, he was thinking about himself, he was thinking about his connection with Anna, and that he was so caught up in what he was going through, he didn't even think to like go and say bye to people. And that in hindsight, this is something that he regretted doing. So it's good for Blake to kind of come clean and say, you know, I wish I had said bye, and thinking about the fact that like he kind of left his connections on this cliffhanger. So I thought that was a great thing for him to say. Yeah, so this interview with Blake was not that long. They didn't have, I think, as many questions to ask him as they did, you know, Patrick and Kacie, because because Blake left the experiment prematurely. So they asked Blake about his thoughts on Edmund. We all see what's going on with Edmund and Calabria, and we see Edmund crying and people saying that he's kind of manipulative, and, you know, he's crying because Calabria won't sleep with him, and he's getting a lot of heat on the internet. So Nick wants to know basically if Blake feels like the way people are seeing Edmund is accurate based on Blake's experiment with Edmund in the men's quarters. And Blake basically says that Edmund is like a great guy and that he has a good heart, and that he doesn't think that he's out here just, you know, this like villain and like using his tears in like a manipulative way. So Blake is standing behind the fact that Edmund just wears his heart on his sleeve and that he's a very emotional person. I disagree. And we also see Nick's wife disagree too. You see Nick's wife and Nick talking, and Nick's wife is saying that, you know, Edmund is definitely manipulating these tears, and it doesn't really make sense. And I agree with Nick's wife. I don't think that Edmund should be having these huge emotional breakdowns, because the conversations that him and Calabria are having are not warranting these breakdowns. And at a certain point, when your emotions are not matching what's going on, it's hard for people not to think that you're kind of weaponizing your tears, right? To get sympathy or to get your way even. You know, Nick Veal disagrees, and he says that he thinks that Edmund is just a highly emotional person and that emotions are running high in the experiment. But I don't necessarily side with that. I think that talking about the conversation of someone wanting to wait to have sex, and then you're sitting here bawling your eyes out, complaining about how you're so nice, and no, something's just not right there. So that basically ended that interview. And then we get into the interview with Patrick. So Nick basically starts, right, this interview with Patrick by asking him how Patrick has been doing emotionally since leaving the pods, and like basically all the backlash on the internet, like, and what people have been saying about him, like how Patrick has been doing with all that. So Patrick says that he's actually okay, and that he's had a lot of support from friends and family, and that the internet has actually been pretty kind to him in terms of the whole experiments and what has aired. He also said that a lot of people have like messaged him and come out and said that they resonate with his experience and his story. And they have said that they were like basically proud of him for being so vulnerable on TV, and even being able to share some of these like deep-seated insecurities he's had with his ethnicity, with growing up in Denver and dating and all of that. So yeah, so Patrick says he's happy that overall he's having a pretty good perception and that he's been okay, since the experiment is over and what people have been saying online. So Nick says that he really enjoyed watching Patrick and appreciated Patrick's genuineness. And I agree with Nick on this. Like, Patrick is someone that no matter what, yeah, he's insecure. Yeah, he has some things he has to work on. But he really did come into this experiment, I think, really trying to find a partner. And I think that he was probably one of the most genuine people from this season, right? Even though things didn't work out with Kacie and he has, his own stuff, like, it doesn't take from the fact that I think he does have a good heart. So that's just something that, like, Nick was acknowledging as well. Okay, so then Nick then goes on to ask Patrick about Anna. Nick wants to know if Patrick better understands why Anna left and if he has any frustration towards Anna about the manner in which she left and not really saying goodbye, right? So Patrick says something he values in someone is a sense of resilience. And he said that when Anna left, he kind of lost, I don't know if he used the word respect for her, but I think he says he kind of saw it as like a turnoff, because in his mind, he's like, yeah, this is an experiment. It's very high pressure. It's not easy. But when the going gets tough, it's like he doesn't want somebody to just cut and run, right? And the fact that Anna did that, I think made Patrick realize, like, clearly this isn't my person, right? So I think Patrick made a very good point that, the behavior that Anna exhibited with leaving without saying goodbye, I think was a terrible, terrible sign. I know that Anna has come out and said that she had her family back home, and based on how her parents are, they didn't understand the idea of the experiment. They thought that she had supposedly got kidnapped and that her being away from them was like a lot on her family, right? On her parents, on her family. That's fair. Like, I am not discounting the reasons why Anna left, right? I think that if there were personal things going on that she had to go tend to, I totally get it, right? Say bye. She could have said goodbye. Like, that is the part that just still rubs me the wrong way with Anna. And I don't think there's any way Anna can really explain why she didn't say bye that makes any sense to me, right? The only thing that makes sense to me is why she left for her family. That's fine, right? But it's like, for her to have built connections this strong with multiple people in the pods and not gone in and given them a simple, hey, I have to go, that will never make sense to me, And Patrick is saying, like, yeah, that was a clear sign that it wouldn't have even worked out between them. So yeah, so then Nick asked Patrick if it was hard for him to watch the phone sex scene back, if it was as hard for him to watch it back as it was for us viewers to see that scene, is basically what they're asking Patrick at this point. So Patrick says that at the time when he was in the experiment, in the pods, he didn't realize in the moment what Kacie was doing, right? Or what she was trying to do at that time. And it wasn't until he watched the show back and saw it in 4K that he was like, oh, she's definitely trying to use sex as a way to distract me from what she just mentioned about her ex-boyfriend, right? That she still was in contact with. So Nick asked for Patrick to basically walk us through how basically Kacie explained her relationship with her ex to Patrick, right? So Patrick explains that at the time when they were in the pods, he had been grilling Kacie to see if she was really serious about wanting to get married, right? Kacie was reassuring him, saying that this is something she really wants, and that in the outside world, she had been dealing with all these F-boys who just kept breaking her heart. And Kacie goes on to say that Patrick doesn't seem like someone that would break her heart. He seems like someone that would take care of her heart, and that he seems genuine and like a good guy, right? So what I have to say about this is, even Kacie saying all these things about Patrick, it's obvious that Kacie picked up on Patrick being a kind person, right? And having that good heart. And it's unfortunate because I think that she kind of took advantage of that in a way. I think that she manipulated him in knowing that he had that soft spot for her and those feelings for her and that level of kindness, and didn't really treat Patrick the way obviously he should have been treated. And I just put that Kacie, in my opinion, doesn't really deserve Patrick's kind heart. I don't think she's deserving. But yeah, so another thing about Kacie is when she mentions that in the outside world she's dealt with F-boys and they've broken her heart, I just have to say that Kacie's 34 years old, right? For her to still be even dealing with F-boys and allowing them to break her heart, to me, is crazy. And the only reason I'm saying this is because I feel like you get to a certain age in life where you can usually somewhat discern when a guy is serious and when he's not, when he's an F-boy. Like, by the time you get into your 30s, I think that that's something you should be able to discern, right? So once again, like, I don't really feel bad for Kacie, right? Because I think that she's using this idea of her having a hard time in dating into this victim mentality, if you get what I'm saying, of like, oh, woe is me, all these guys are out here breaking my heart. I think Kacie is part of that problem. You see, I'm not saying she can control whether these guys are like, there's infidelity or they're cheating, but I'm just saying that she can do a better job at discerning who is serious about her and who isn't. And I get the feeling that she doesn't do a good job of that, and it's negatively affected her dating experiences. So that's all I have to say about that. Patrick goes on to say that Kacie told him that he needed to trust her, basically. And so Patrick goes on to say that he trusted Kacie to take care of whatever she needed to take care of in terms of her ex-boyfriend when they went back to Denver, right? So he was hoping that she would do the right thing, right? That even though she was still in contact with this ex, that she would know that, like, okay, I'm in a committed relationship now. It's as serious as potential marriage. I'm not going to keep this other person hanging around. So Patrick trusted that she would do that, right? So Nick mentioned something, and Nick says something, like, he kind of butts in as Patrick is responding and says that he thought that it was odd when Kacie told Patrick that he needed to trust her. And I think Nick said something here that was pretty insightful. There's a difference between saying you need to trust me and somebody saying you can trust me, right? And I think that that's very interesting, and that's like a very good point. I'm assuming the people that say things like you need to trust me, they're usually trying to speed up your level of trust in them because they are possibly manipulative and they want to speed up those feelings so that maybe you don't have to question anything else about them, right? I think in the moment, Kacie could feel that Patrick was retreating a little bit and he was suspicious and he was like, what is it with this ex? Like, he was clearly worried, right, that she had this ex lingering and waiting for her on the outside. And I think her way of trying to kind of quench that was saying, hey, you need to trust me, right? But I agree, there is a difference between saying you need to trust someone and then somebody saying you can trust me. I think when you say you need to trust me, it creates this sense of you almost feeling like you need to speed up those feelings of trust for that person, as opposed to saying you can trust me, which is like you just letting them know, like, I got you, right? But you're not necessarily saying you need to trust me like right now, right? So I thought that was a really good point to make because I didn't even think about that. And people don't realize that even in people's words, they're making you feel a certain way, right? And they're eliciting a certain emotion out of you, right? And you're not even like aware of that. And I do think that Kacie telling Patrick that he needed to trust her was a way of him or of her trying to speed up Patrick's trust towards her because she was like, she didn't want to lose this connection, right? She wanted that engagement. So Patrick being very hesitant and uncomfortable with saying where his parents are from and wants to know if he regrets revealing anything about his like ethnicity and background. So Patrick says he doesn't regret that. And says that basically what wasn't aired is both of them going back and forth about, details and talking about their insecurities. And Patrick says that he thinks it's important for somebody to know where you're from, even prior to considering like an engagement or marriage, because essentially they would have to be immersed in your culture in some sense once they meet your family. So that's Patrick's take on it. I don't think there was any issues with Patrick saying it. I was just more worried about how uncomfortable it was for him to say it. But personally, I don't think I would have said it. That's just my take on it. I think that the whole point of the experiment is to leave these things out, right? So I don't think I would have even shared that. I would have probably just told Kacie respectfully that, I don't really want to, disclose that type of information. So, but I do get where Patrick is coming from, because I think that when he did share it and Kacie was aware, I think he felt a sense of relief, like, okay, well, at least she knows. And I think it did kind of put him at ease in terms of that. So then Nick goes into questions about the reveal, okay? And Nick says that during the reveal, he didn't pick up on any signs of there not being attraction between them. Like, he thought that the reveal went good, like it went great. I thought the reveal went great as well. I was hopeful for Patrick and Kacie. So Nick asked Patrick if there was anything he now picks up on looking back at the reveal that during the reveal he didn't really notice. Basically, Nick also wants to know if there are any like clues that she was starting to get hesitant, right? Or question how she felt about him during the reveal. Patrick says the biggest clue that he thinks that he should have probably maybe paid more attention to, but that he did notice, was that when he went back after the reveal and walked back, he noticed that Kacie wasn't there, right? And this is something I noticed too. She moved very quickly. She had her drink in her hand and she was just like gone, in terms of just trying to not almost like be on camera anymore. Didn't look back to see if Patrick was still there or say bye or like see you soon. Nothing. And I didn't want to think that that was a big deal. And I know Patrick obviously wanted to give the whole situation the benefit of the doubt, but Patrick also picked up on that too. And I think it did kind of bother him, because he was like, well, it seemed like it went well, but like she just like disappeared. So I didn't realize Patrick also picked up on this. So the next question they ask is basically they want to know if the first time Patrick heard Kacie telling the producers that she wasn't attracted to him was when he watched the show back. So Patrick says that he had no idea that Kacie wasn't attracted to him, and that it wasn't until the show aired and he saw that scene that he realized the reason she wanted to end things was because of a lack of attraction. So that means that even after they left the show, right, and Kacie did her big one with jumping on him and crying and the whole thing, Kacie never really told Patrick, like, hey, I'm so sorry. The reason I didn't want to continue things is because I wasn't attracted to you. Patrick essentially had to find that out when watching the show back. Am I surprised? No. But yeah, so that's that. So then Nick says that he would have appreciated Kacie a lot more if she had like the ability to just come clean and be honest. So he says that he would have liked it if Kacie had just kind of owned it and said, like, I'm not attracted to you. And I agree with Nick. Like, I think that with her trying to spare Patrick's feelings, at a certain point, it just looked so disingenuous and like she was just a straight up liar, right? And I don't know if she didn't think that stuff with the producers wouldn't have been aired, but it just made her look really, really, really bad. So Nick explains how it was just a very hard watch for all of us to see, Kacie basically lying to Patrick during the breakup and saying, it's the media, like it's the cameras, it's the show, it's too much for me, right? And not really explaining to Patrick that, hey, I'm not attracted to you. I don't really want to continue this any further. She kept blaming it on the show and kept saying, I love you, and was kissing all up on him, confusing the crap out of Patrick, He was like, what's going on here? So I agree with Nick, like she could have handled that so much better. Yeah, and Nick explains that he just felt for Patrick in that moment because like Patrick is so unassuming and he's just like a deer in headlights, like, hey, I'll see you in Colorado. And Kacie's like, no, you won't. Like in her mind, she's like, you won't ever see me again. Like that's what she's thinking. And Patrick is holding out for hope that isn't there, right? So it's crazy. Like, and then Nick also makes a comment about how the amount of times Kacie was saying, I love you, that it was low key, like getting to a point of like love bombing, right? Where you're saying this to someone, but it's like, you're not really being honest, right? Because it's almost like she's masking and saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, to mask the fact that like the attraction just wasn't there, like, because she didn't want to just come clean. She didn't have the kahunas to come clean. So Nick asks if Patrick was angry watching it back, right? Watching the breakup back. Patrick says he agrees with Nick and says that she should have just told him, right, that she wasn't attracted to him. He says it would have been more honorable for her to have done that. And Patrick says something that I think makes a lot of sense. And he basically alludes to the fact that he also wants to give Kacie some credit in saying that because Patrick's biggest insecurity was like regarding him being rejected for his race and the way he looks, Kacie like didn't have the heart to tell him to his face that she wasn't attracted to him. And I understand where Patrick is coming from, because I said this in one of my previous videos as well, that I think Kacie just didn't have the heart to say it. But what I will hold Kacie accountable for, right, and what I still think is like something that is just, I can't get past with her, is the kissing, the jumping on him, right? And they're kissing and he's grabbing her, right? The saying, I love you, I love you, I love you way too many times. All of that, extremely unnecessary. Like, it's one thing to not want to tell him you're not attracted to him. It's another thing to have done all those other things she did. She didn't need to do any of those things. And I still think she's dead wrong for that. So I hear where Patrick is coming from in saying that she probably just didn't have the heart to tell him that she wasn't attracted to him. But there's nothing that can excuse the behavior that also showed up. Like that was crazy. So Nick basically brings up how people online were getting on Patrick for not picking up on the fact that Kacie didn't want to be with him. And, Nick explains like that they need to essentially the internet should give Patrick more grace, because at the time Patrick had no knowledge that Kacie wasn't attracted to him. The only knowledge that Patrick had was Kacie thought that the show was too much for her and that the cameras was too much and that she didn't want to go on the honeymoon because it was just moving too fast. But Kacie never said, hey, I don't want to continue things with you in Colorado, right? So in Patrick's mind, he's like, okay, maybe the experiment is too much for her, but she's not saying she doesn't want to be with me. And then she's jumping on me, like we're long lost lovers. It's confusing, right? So Patrick thinking that they're going to meet up in Colorado was actually very fair. It wasn't him not picking up on the cues. Kacie was flat out lying, right? And showing Patrick one thing that wasn't true, right? So all Patrick had to go on was, hey, this experiment is too much, but we might still have a chance outside of this Love is Blind experiment. And I agree, like, people do need to give Patrick grace for that, because he didn't have all the knowledge that we had as viewers, right? He only had whatever Kacie was telling him to go off of at the time. So Nick then says something else that I also found to be pretty insightful. And he says that he knows that Kacie probably dated guys in the past that didn't want to be upfront about their feelings, and that were even maybe deceitful, right? And were not straight up and honest with her. And she probably wished that they had been honest with her, and was probably even angry at some of these guys for not being upfront with her. So Nick says he's wondering if Kacie would want someone to treat her the same way she treated Patrick, right? Which is a great, great question. So Patrick says that's a fair question and that she didn't handle it the best way. And then they ask if Patrick has spoken to Kacie since all of this happened. And Patrick says they will have to see what happens in the teaser in the upcoming episodes, meaning that in the upcoming episodes released, I think tomorrow, we will get to see more of what went down between them. So I guess there's more that they're going to talk about in regards to Patrick and Kacie. So Patrick then goes on to say that he actually never saw Kacie in person one-on-one. And seems like they only met up in a group setting. So it seems like after the show had finished, after they had left the show prematurely, Patrick and Kacie, they had met up with some of the other cast members and maybe had all been out in a group, but Patrick and Kacie never met up one-on-one for coffee or to talk or anything like that. Patrick also says that they never talked on the phone. They never had like a chance to just air anything out with just them. And then Nick explains that Patrick's confusion came partly from the way Kacie was jumping on him during the breakup and all the kissing and all the I love yous and everything. And Patrick says that this situation has made him do some inner work and really make him question what he will tolerate from somebody else going forward, especially in a relationship and with dating. And he says that he kind of went on a healing journey. And I was really happy to hear that. I was happy to hear that Patrick had done some sense of, self-reflection and understanding how he's also contributed to this situation in some sense, right? Because we can't completely blame Kacie for this entire situation. Obviously, Kacie handled things extremely poorly, but it's good for Patrick to be able to reflect on some ways in which he can also better himself from this experience. Yeah, Patrick then, I think the last couple things he says is that Anna actually did reach out to him after the experiment and that they met up for coffee. So he was saying that if anybody's kind of giving Anna any, or talking negatively about Anna online about leaving, that she actually did do like the right thing and did reach out to him. And I'm assuming she probably apologized and they got to clear the air on that. Well, the last thing that they ask Patrick is they want to know if they get a chance to speak to Kacie, if there's anything Patrick specifically wants them to ask Kacie. And Patrick literally responds by saying he's good. He's like, I'm good. There's nothing really left to say or that I want to know about. I don't blame Patrick for that. I think that he's probably over it. And I think people don't realize that Patrick mentioned something about how this was filmed maybe like a year ago. So they don't like air these actual seasons until a while after it's actually filmed. So Patrick is probably over things at this point, right? It's like, this is like, I've moved on, I'm good. There's nothing else Patrick really wants to know about when it comes to this situation. So I think that that's fair. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the interviews with Kacie. So the first question Nick asks Kacie, right, is if Kacie has any regrets about how she went about the experiment as a whole. Like if there's anything she regretted doing. Kacie says that when she watched it back, right, she does have a lot of regrets, but she doesn't think that she would take back how she handled things with Patrick in the end. She says that she wears her heart on her sleeve and that she thinks that going on the honeymoon, going to, I think it was Baja, would have been the worst thing that she could have done, because essentially she was like sure at that point she did not want to continue anything with Patrick. Okay, and that I think that's fair. I don't think it really makes sense for her to say she doesn't regret how she handled things, because I think that she should have some regret in terms of that. But I guess, that's just how it starts off. So she says she doesn't really regret too much and that she's happy that she decided not to continue with the experiment, which I think makes a lot of sense, because in her mind, she was like, I can't fake the funk anymore. Like, if I don't like this guy, I have to just come clean. And my issues with Kacie wasn't that she left prematurely. Like, our issues with Kacie, even as viewers, is that it's how she behaved, right? It's the behavior that's the issue with her, in my opinion. So Nick explains to Kacie that during the breakup, it was very tough to constantly watch her tell Patrick that she loved him when she obviously told producers that she wasn't really into this guy. Like, this wasn't her guy. And that seeing that the producers cut, like basically the production cut that scene, it didn't make her look good at all. It kind of made it look like she was lying to Patrick. So Nick acknowledges that Kacie was trying to soften the blow in terms of her not wanting to outright tell Patrick she wasn't attracted to him, but says it was very confusing for Patrick when she was kissing all up on him, jumping all up on him. It was crazy, because it's like, how are you going to say that you don't want to continue, but then you're doing all of that, right? And I agree with Nick. Like, the issue wasn't the fact that she wanted to leave and that she wasn't attracted to him. It was the behaviors that just didn't make any sense for anybody watching. So Nick wants to know basically if she regrets how she handled the breakup. Kacie acknowledges that she did lead Patrick on, right? And she admits that she didn't think the clip of her telling production that she wasn't attracted to him would have ever aired, which I knew she thought this, because that came to my mind. Like, production is messy for that. I knew Kacie thought that they would never air that, right? Like, in her mind, she thought that she was saying it in a safe space. Maybe she forgot about all the cameras and the fact that she's on TV. But yeah, she didn't think that would have been aired. And then Kacie says that she actually did have intentions of trying to date Patrick when she got back to Denver. And I'm not gonna lie, like, when she said that, I was confused, because I think we all know as viewers that she did not really want to continue things with Patrick after the reveal. I don't believe that she had any intentions of dating Patrick in Colorado. I don't really know why Kacie's still lying. I think that at this point, it's better to just be honest, right? Like, we've seen it all. We all watched what happened, your reaction. Like, I don't understand that, because I think she's lying. Like, there's no way that that's true. And yeah, so then Nick mentions, after, Kacie mentions that she wanted to date Patrick in Denver, Nick then obviously brings up that Patrick tried reaching out to Kacie and that Kacie didn't really want to meet up or even talk on the phone one-on-one, that she wasn't really into it. So Nick wants to know why Kacie didn't give Patrick the benefit of like a one-on-one conversation or a phone call or a coffee date. Like, what happened? So Kacie responds by saying that she has receipts and that Patrick did not reach out to her after the show. She says that she actually reached out to him. Okay, so interesting, because they're saying completely different things now. And that Patrick basically wanted to meet up immediately after filming and they got back to Colorado. He wanted to meet up and talk. And Kacie was like, I went through so much emotionally, I'm still not ready to meet up and talk. So Kacie said that she needed more time, as she was like so emotional with everything that had happened. Then Kacie mentions that Patrick went to a group event, right? So like, essentially they never met up one-on-one, but it seems like after filming, all the cast members like went out, maybe to a bar or whatever. And Kacie also mentions that watching the show back, she realized that she essentially was second best. And that's something that I never really thought about. Like, we all saw that Kacie was second best, but then I never thought about how Kacie would think about the situation, seeing that Patrick really did want to choose Anna, right? So Kacie is also starting to now question whether Patrick was really ever into her after watching the show back, right? Because she's like, wow, I was the second option. It doesn't excuse Kacie's crazy behavior, don't get me wrong, but that is a perspective that I never thought about. Like, as viewers, we knew what the situation was and that Kacie was not his first choice, but Kacie is now seeing that. And I think Kacie watching that back, it's kind of dawning on her that maybe her and Patrick were never really in love. I think that she saw a much stronger connection with Anna. Don't get me wrong, before she watched the show back, we all knew Kacie did not want to continue anything with Patrick. So she can't pretend like that in any way was a part of her decision, if that's what she's trying to do now. But she's just saying that she's realizing that their connection maybe wasn't even as strong as she thought it was after seeing what it was like for him and Anna and the connection that they had and how strong that was. When they went out as a group, basically like the cast members, Patrick, Kacie, and everybody else, Anna, Kacie mentions that Patrick did come up to her and that it seemed like he was kind of drunk and that he was kind of mad about what had happened and how things were handled, like he was hurt. I think Kacie probably didn't think this was the best place to talk about these things. She says that she ended up leaving the group event early, and she mentioned something about how she was gonna let them do their thing. Like, she wanted to let them do that. And I was like, what does she mean by this? And I'm thinking that Anna was probably at this event, right? Because she was also one of the cast members. And I was thinking, was Anna there? And were Patrick and Anna kind of vibing? Is that what she meant by let them do their thing? Because I just thought, what does she mean by that terminology? I wish that they had kind of asked her more about that. Nick then asked Kacie about how it seemed like she was somewhat still in communication with her ex-boyfriend, right? And Kacie mentioned something that I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. But she basically says that you don't know you're going to be on Love is Blind until a week prior to the show. So essentially, like, people are dating before they know that they're going to be on Love is Blind. And a week is not a very long time for you to realize you're going to go on it. So that actually does kind of explain why maybe prior to going on, they were in contact pretty recently, right? Yeah, I didn't really think about that. I was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't know. I don't think that Kacie should have even brought up her ex. So if I was Nick interviewing, I would have asked Kacie why she brought up her ex at all. Like, why did she think bringing him up was important? I don't get it. I don't think he needed to have been brought up at all. So then Nick asked Kacie about the phone sex scene and people alluding to her doing that to alleviate the fact that she is still in contact with her ex and was talking to Patrick about that. And Kacie says that if she could take back anything in her life, it would be episode 4. So at least Kacie's being honest for once, because she hasn't been honest throughout this whole interview, but I think she's being honest in saying that she does regret that scene. She talks about how her family's Mormon and how her mom like works at a mall on the weekends, and how some of her mom's friends have been like, oh my God, we saw your daughter on TV. So she says that she's definitely embarrassed, and that, you know, these are conversations that she never thought that like her family or like the entire, you know, a lot of America would see. So basically the interview ends and they ask Kacie if there's anything else that she wants to say or put out there. And she says that she didn't handle things the best way she could have. And she feels like the most hated person in a way from the show, and that the experiment kind of blew up in her face. And she does go on to say that she realizes now that love is just probably not blind for her, and that she wanted to believe the experiment could work, but that it obviously didn't work. She didn't find her person in it. And yeah, that love is probably just not blind, and that that's okay. So that's how that ends. Tell me what you guys think. Please tell me your thoughts down below. I still stand by, I really like Patrick. It seemed like Patrick and Kacie had different things to say about what happened after the breakup. So I know for a fact that this will be brought up in the reunion, only because their stories are kind of different. Like, there's things that overlap in terms of them both saying that they only met up in a group setting. That's true, it seems, but in terms of who reached out to who, and them, you know, Kacie not wanting to reach out to Patrick or meet up with him, there's kind of differences in that. So I do know that will probably be talked about more in the reunion. Please let me know your thoughts down below. Like, comment, and subscribe.